go out in this world and find some of these stories and buildings around you for yourself. Alrighty. Here's the night on the river, y'all, so we're heading out now. Before we get a little bit closer to these buildings, I'd like to start off our tour with a little bit of early history of Chicago, just give some groundwork for why we're here in this particular area. Why is Chicago where it is? Well, the primary reason why we are here is because of this river we're on right now. This is really where our story starts, this Chicago River. It's our reason for being here, it's where we get our name. This river is a connecting train route. You see over here on the left-hand side is Lake Michigan. It goes all the way down to a couple of the waterways that will eventually take you to the Mississippi. So essentially, we connect the Great Lakes down to the Gulf of Mexico. Very important connection. Now, for many generations before the Europeans came through here, this land and this river was owned by the natives, the native Maine, Potawatomi, Algonquin, amongst others. They named this river, so in a sense, they actually named it Chicago, because this is our Chicago River. Originally called Chicago. Chicago is the original name for the river. Chicago, Chicago, that's our name. But the original name for Chicago, I actually want you to know, Chicago is an Algonquin word that means smelly onion. There were these native onions and leeks that grew around the river and made it smell terrible. They called it the Smelling Onion River, which means that yes, we are still the city of the smelling onion. The big smelling onion, if you will. I will. I'm gonna get that shirt someday. Our very first Chicagoan arrived here in the late 1700s. His name is Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, a name that is actually dedicated to this lovely street that we're about to pass underneath. This is Lakeshore Drive. It was just renamed Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Drive a couple of months ago. Our very first Chicagoan, du Sable, was a Haitian immigrant. He traveled all the way from the Caribbean in the late 1700s, across America with his family and settling down here through all those trials and tribulations. Our first Chicagoan was an Afro-Caribbean man named du Sable. And that's the beginning of our story. All right, have the city open up to us on the other side here.
Wow.
Lovely. All right.
Yes.
Chicago, everybody looking pretty tonight. Let's dive into some architecture. Now, the first building I'd like to share with you all on our tour today is going to be coming up on our left-hand side. It's pretty hard not to notice. It's the newest addition to our skyline, a rather tall structure with a very unique design. I'm talking about these three wavy blue buildings attached together that make up the one St. Regis. Now, the St. Regis coming up on the left-hand side was finished in the last year. It comes to us from a local Chicago architect named Jeannie Gang. Jeannie Gang is awesome. She's my favorite architect. A local Chicagoan that is actually working around the world today because she's in very high demand. She's a genius. This is one of her genius buildings in our city. The St. Regis finished in the last year at 1,191 feet tall. It is our new third tallest in the city, and the tallest building in the world designed by a female-led architecture firm as well. By Jeannie Gang and Studio Gang here in our city of Chicago. But I wanted you to notice something a bit silly about the design up there, by the way. It was a little bit hard to see at this moment in time, but can you guys notice that there are a couple of floors with glass on them way up there? Way up the top, 83rd and 84th floor. They did not forget the glass. What they're actually doing is leaving those two floors partially open like that to allow the wind to blow through the building. It's called a blow-through floor. One of the many ways we might keep a tall building like that from swaying too much. Because if you didn't know this, all tall buildings sway, but you don't want them to sway too much because you don't want to get sick at the top floor. There's a lot of different ways to keep a tall building from swaying too much. And I'm going to teach you three on our tour tonight. That's our first, very simply a blow-through floor. Just let that wind blow through to reduce the pressure. All right, we've got two more coming later on, but I want to move on for now. Talk about a building coming up behind this triangle and this big black box. Got a lot of shapes here. I want to talk about that tall building with the white waves running down the side. See that building back there? The balconies that undulate down the side of the structure in a bunch of unique patterns. That is Aqua Tower 2009. Also from Jeannie Gang. Get back to that Jeannie Gang here at the beginning of our tour. And again, playing with waves in a different fashion. Those balconies on the outside are designed to be completely unique from one another. They are all mathematically different, making for a very cool design. And it's very pleasing to look at, but it also has some practical functions. What I'd like to mention is that if your balconies fan down the side of the building in unique patterns, rather than just being stacked on top of each other like your average apartment building, That means you can actually stand on your own balcony and look over and see about your neighbors. You can say, hello neighbor. Did you happen to know that my balcony is mathematically different from your balcony? Because it's true. And that's what we call a conversation starter. I know what she wants you to do though. She wants you to get out and meet the people around you, create a community. Which is part of the reason why she designs a building like that. One of the many reasons I've always loved Jeannie Gang as an architect. She thinks of her buildings to the communities they are. Alright, concluding the Jeannie Gang portion of our tour. Now we're entering up here to the city center. Right there in front of us is Michigan Avenue, although it's a little dark. As we get a little bit closer, you'll notice the bridge actually has a different name. This is our DuSable Bridge, if you remember that name. It's our father of Chicago, that Haitian immigrant. Chicago got started right there. Now this gorgeous white building coming up on the right here in our city center, this white building with the clock tower at the top is the Wrigley Building. 1921 and 24, been here in our city center for 100 years now. Now the Wrigley Building is where we're going to start to learn those styles of architecture. See, this is a style of architecture called Spanish Revival. Spanish Revival. Because in the late 1800s, early 1900s, as we were developing this downtown area in Chicago for the first time, remember there isn't really a distinctly American style of architecture yet to lean on. It's a very young country that still took a lot of their sense of beauty from Europe. Pretty literally. That clock tower up there is a design that comes from the Giralda Tower, which is on a cathedral in Sevilla, Spain. Hence, Spanish Revival, because it's copying and pasting the design you've already seen. And then that's kind of kind of a natural starting place for us. Up here, Carlos, we have the second tallest building in our city. From our National Hotel and Tower, 1,389 feet all the way to a spire up there. Tall glass structure, I want you to notice, has 3 patios going up the side. Now, this first patio here is actually the exact same height as the Wrigley Building we passed by. That second patio, the exact same height as the Ladder Tower, which is that skinny Gothic building on the left over there. The Gothic rocket shooting off to space. And the third patio is the exact same height as the Annual Plaza, which is that big old black box building coming up on the right-hand side. This building kind of tips the cap to the older buildings around it. This is a style of architecture called contextualism, because it fits in to its context. A site-specific building designed to mimic its surroundings and add a sense of cohesion to the story of our city. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that style later on. But I'm going to this big old black box here. It's the AMA Plaza, 1973, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Now, Mies van der Rohe, this architect is known as the father of American modernism, meaning this is modernism. Big black boxes. He built over 40 of these buildings in our city, and they all look essentially the same. We will learn why later. Just wanted you to know modernism's black boxes for now. That later, because I want to talk about these lovely corn crops coming up on the right hand here. These circular towers you see are the Marina City Towers, very photogenic towers finished in 1968 and designed by Bertrand Goldberg. Now Goldberg, this architect, considered himself, well, primarily a social scientist. He is working on his architecture as a way to go about his social science. These towers were actually a bit of an experiment of his in the 60s. You know, he designed them to try and invite Chicagoans to live in the city center.
Oh my God.
Live on the outskirts. You all of your amenities in one location. A literal city within a city. You can live in the city center for the first time and not have to worry about everything you need. Got it all where you are. City within a city, Marina City. You live up top, have your car, valet park for you down below. Laundromat, daycare, movie theater, ice skating rink, offices, restaurants, all tucked back there. And your marina. Everything you need, including your boat. And that's what we call a full Chicago life. Kind of the genius of the structures, it really did provide a way to live in the city center for the first time. Creating your desire to be here in general, spurring a new residential revolution, flipping over that population from the outside to the inside, where most are today. Let's go over to the left-hand side. See this tall glass structure with the white granite columns on the outside? That's 77 West Wacker to our left, 1992. I want you to notice that this building has these columns that soar to the top and meet up with a triangle at the very top of the building. You see that? It's called a pediment. If anybody's ever seen something like the Parthenon, it should look familiar because it's taking a classical theme from Greek architecture. This is a style called neoclassical. Neo meaning new, classical.
Classical.
taking those themes and updating them. So rather than being a boring old parking lot, it's more like a tall, shiny parking lot. There's a lot happening on the river tonight. Over here on the right-hand side, we got this low-lying red brick building here. Reed Murdoch, 1914, the grandfather of this section of the river. Speak quietly. It's past its bedtime. This old building has been here a long time, had a lot of lives. Even as the Encyclopedia Britannica's headquarters there nowadays. An encyclopedia building. I wanted to share a little bit about our bridges with you, because these are very important to our city as well, and they're actually unique to our city for the most part. This one here is one of our many Chicago-style bridges. A Chicago-style bridge like this one is a double-leaf trunnion bascule bridge. Double leaf means that they open up in the middle, like so. Oh yeah. We actually have 37 movable bridges in our city, which is the second most in the world, only by Amsterdam. We used to use them. Their primary function nowadays is they allow our sailboats to get to and from the lake. Because our sailboats primarily live on the south branch of the river while the lake freezes over a bit during the winter. And then in the spring they go that way, in the fall they go this way as they go back to their homes. They lift up the bridges one by one, sending them on through the march of the sailboats, the primary function of our movable bridges nowadays. Very fun to see. Should be starting up in a couple of weeks, actually. Now, beyond the bridge on the right, I want to interact with this massive building coming up there with the Indiana limestone on the outside, get some fun lights up at the top. This is the Merchandise Mart, or the Mart as we call it, finished in 1930. This is our first example of the style coming out of the Roaring Twenties, Art Deco. Welcome to Art Deco, the soaring style from the Roaring Twenties. See, this building has these vertical lines in the middle of that structure there, next to deep, dark inset windows. They are breaking up the horizontal lines on the building on purpose, so that your eyes might naturally follow the movement up. Art Deco is designed to emphasize verticality and movement. So moving geometric patterns, vertical lines are a big part of Art Deco. And you can see there's some arrows running along the bottom here, moving patterns. But if you do focus on these vertical lines next to deep inset windows like that, pinstripes on the outside of the building is almost always a dead giveaway for Art Deco. So we're going to use that later on in the tour. I think of them as pinstripes as it is at the Roaring Twenties. I imagine they were wearing their suits when they made the building. Pinstripes on their suits and their buildings as well. Art Deco in the Roaring Twenties. And now we have entered into Wolf Point. Welcome to this beautiful area of our river. This is the confluence of our three branches of the river. We're on the main branch. The north branch heads off to our right. We're going to go down the south branch to our left. This area has changed a lot over the years. Because for most of our history in Chicago, the industries that actually lived on our north and south branch polluted the river pretty indiscriminately. You know, we really didn't want to live around areas like Wolf Point for most of our history. We've really only been cleaning the river up directly in the last 40 years or so. Which is why in the last 5, there is so much brand new architecture around areas like this. There are several very brand new buildings in this area, including these two glass structures in front of us. The one looks like a pencil stuck in the ground, that one at the arch in the bottom, that big old McDonald's pie box. Both of these are 2017, part of the revitalization of our Chicago River in areas like Wolf Point. This building coming up on the right here is 150 North Riverside. With that super skinny base, this big old pencil stuck in the ground, that's a 30-foot wide base to that building, which is like the width of our boat. I call that normal. It's the only way they could actually make that structure where it is. Because over there, on that side of the river, there are actually these Metro and Amtrak train lines down below the land. Bit of a unique structural challenge for these buildings coming up. On the backside of that structure is where those train lines run, which is why they couldn't put foundation down there. It would ruin somebody's morning commute. Well, they also could put paving down the front side of the building, but not because of train lines. I want you to notice that over here on the front side of the building, we have a river walk. Because as we've been changing the way we use the Chicago River, we are standardizing those. We are requiring all brand new buildings along the river to have a 30-foot setback so that we can actually be next to the river that we've been cleaning up and actually use it and love it in a new way. The next chapter of our story is Chicagoans trying to get back to the river as we've been cleaning it up, as that building has such a skinny base because of those two stipulations on either side. We'll talk a little bit more about that structure as we head back through. We're going to move on for now to this big old black and silver building coming up on the right. This is the Boeing building, home to Boeing. They make planes. But it used to be home to the Morton Salt Company. And if you did not know that, there's a clue they used to live there. Originally designed for that company in 1990. So they designed the building with that company in mind. So I want you to notice as we come around the bridge. Now, way at the top of this building, there are 6 holes cut in the steel frame designed to make the building itself look like a giant salt shaker for the Morton Salt Company. Oh yeah. Boeing moved in 2001. They left it around, so I guess they weren't too salty about it. Over here on the left-hand side, we got this brand new building, just finished in the last year, the Bank of America building. As you can see, it has a 30-foot setback with brand new river walk, just like 150 North Riverside. The unique way that they've designed around that here is by adding these cool beam steel beams that you see. They are not only for show, they are structural, going from the first full floor to the third, accommodating for that setback, and they do light them on very fine night. That's the Bank of America building. Now, on the other side of this bridge, what we call the Art Deco Canyon. Either side we have giant Art Deco buildings. On the left is the Civic Opera building. On the right, 2 North Riverside Plaza, both built in 1929, which means that we have just arrived in the Roaring Twenties. Welcome to the Jazz Age. Now, here in the Jazz Age, I want to bring you all on a little journey through time. Starting in this era, because on the right-hand side, the next 5 buildings coming up are going to be built chronologically. So this is a pretty convenient opportunity for us as we drive down the river to go through these decades in America, see how we get from one style to the next.
It'd be pretty good. Huh?
Starting in with Art Deco, how do we get from that
Starting to feel like
modernism? How different? So here in the Roaring Twenties, remember this is a time of great optimism in America. They're having a party and spending a lot of money, and then what happens in 1929? Stock market crashes. Because of the Great Depression and the trials and tribulations, we see about a 25-year gap in architecture where we aren't making office buildings around the country because people are working. So it's not really until we get to the late 50s, early 60s that architecture booms again, and modernism is the style of the day. But it's still pretty different from Art Deco. So consider that these architects here in the 60s making something like this would have grown up for the most part during the Great Depression. This generation is radically different from the generation in the Roaring Twenties. They are not wasting money at all. They're very conservative. They learned those conservative